It hides in plain sight. Epstein was hiding in plain sight. We all knew about him. We all knew what he was doing.
What year is
But we
this?
had no one that was, no legal aspect that would go after him. They were afraid of him. For whatever reason, they were afraid of him.
We all knew. Think about that for a second. They all knew and did nothing. Most people think the Jeffrey Epstein scandal was about one man, a wealthy financier who ran a sex trafficking ring and somehow got away with it for years. But investigative journalist Whitney Webb argues we've been looking at it all wrong.
So as far as I see it, the narrative about Jeffrey Epstein that I think most people have absorbed because it's been the mainstream media coverage, they focus pretty specifically on what he was doing from 2000 to about 2006 or so, and only on the sex crimes.
Today we're breaking down why Webb insists Epstein was never a separate scandal, and why understanding this matters now more than ever. Let's start with the uncomfortable fact that Epstein didn't operate alone. And this wasn't just about Ghislaine Maxwell helping him recruit girls. It was about something else.
Necessarily. What we're trying to untangle here is the truth of who Epstein was and why was he taken down. Because I don't think he was taken down because in 2019, all of a sudden, the U.S. government became outraged about the sweetheart deal of 2007, 12 years after the fact, and then wanted to rectify some wrong. I think it was about something else.
Webb's work in her book, One Nation Under Blackmail, reveals a vast network of financial, political, and intelligence connections that protected him. Take Leslie Wexner, for example, the billionaire founder of Victoria's Secret, who gave Epstein power of attorney over his entire fortune.
Leslie Wexner, his tax attorney got shot in the face in broad daylight a few days before he was supposed to testify to the IRS. And Columbus, Ohio police obviously investigated this murder and produced this document that talks extensively about Leslie Wexner and his ties to organized crime interests.
Then there are the intelligence ties. Alex Acosta, the prosecutor who gave Epstein that infamous sweetheart deal, later said he was told to back off because Epstein belonged to intelligence.
You can do stuff on JFK assassination. You can do stuff on many different things. What got you turned on about wanting to learn about what's going on with Epstein?
Well, it was actually when Alex Acosta, who was Secretary of Labor under Trump, he was quoted by Vicky Ward and some other people as saying that the reason he backed off on Epstein was because he was told that Epstein, quote, belonged to intelligence. So I originally wasn't planning to write about the case because I tend to focus more on underreported stories, and there was a lot of buzz around Epstein after his arrest at that time. But once the intelligence angle came up, it was kind of like, well, I'd like to see, where that leads, because even when that acknowledgement came out, there wasn't a lot of interest, at least it seemed to me anyway, in mainstream media, and getting really to the bottom of what that means, that he belonged to.
Webb's argument gets really important here. By focusing only on Epstein as an individual monster, we miss the bigger picture. We're distracted by the spectacle, the private island, the Lolita Express, the famous names in the Black Book, while ignoring the infrastructure that made it all possible.
In my opinion, because this is a guy that really entered, the workforce, I guess you could say, sometime in the 70s, and he was, visiting the Clinton White House in the 90s, and there's been very little interest, especially in American mainstream media, in talking about that particular period of time in Jeffrey Epstein's career. Actually, like UK media outlets like the Daily Mail and outlets like that have been much more focused on those aspects of the Epstein case than American mainstream media, and that's pretty telling because, Bill Clinton's an American.
How does one man abuse thousands of victims over decades, with everyone knowing, and nothing happens?
Trouble.
Cindy McCain in January 2020 she was in front of a stadium full of people. She said, we all knew what Jeffrey Epstein was doing.
Yeah.
All these people knew. So all these people, after he was arrested, acting like, oh, yeah, well, I didn't.
Cindy McCain said it out loud in 2020. We all knew what he was doing.
It hides in plain sight. Epstein was hiding in plain sight. We all knew about him. We all knew what he was doing.
If senators knew, if intelligence knew, if law enforcement knew, and they did nothing, that's not a failure of the system. That's the system working exactly as designed.
there any connection between the two?
Yeah, I mean, I write about it pretty extensively. They were very close. And, even Roy Cohn's, probably one of his best-known biographers, Nicholas von Hoffman, that wrote Citizen Cohn, just couldn't really even explain why the official story of J. Edgar Hoover and Roy Cohn's meeting, he just found it very odd because it was so uncommon at that time for someone to just waltz in to J. Edgar Hoover's office and have that kind of access to him right away. But there's been several authors, and I document this all in Volume 1 pretty extensively, that point to there having been some sort of relationship previously, that they had met previously through some sort of weird sexual, it seems to have been a sexual blackmail operation, and Roy Cohn later apparently admitted this to an NYPD detective. There was some sort of sexual blackmail thing going on that entrapped J. Edgar Hoover, and Roy Cohn participated, not necessarily in entrapping J. Edgar Hoover, but they had these sex parties, right? And so J. Edgar Hoover was seen at these, Roy Cohn was seen as these, and a guy that was close to both Hoover and Cohn, Louis Rosenstiel, who was a liquor baron of that particular area, was also sort of in this same circuit, and it's alleged that this all took place at the Plaza Hotel.
Webb argues that Epstein was what she calls a baton passer, someone who inherited this role from earlier networks. She traces the lineage back to figures like Roy Cohn, the notorious lawyer who represented mobsters and politicians alike, who ran similar sexual blackmail operations in the 1950s and 60s. Before Cohn, there were others. This wasn't invented by Epstein. It was perfected over generations. Now, let's talk about the part that really makes people uncomfortable, the intelligence angle. Webb's research shows that sexual blackmail has been a standard intelligence tactic for decades. It's not exotic spy movie stuff. It's documented history.
So basically what I argue in my book is that the network behind Epstein, and the reason why there's so many powerful people in this group, is because it's born out of this union that occurred during World War II. Between organized crime and the nascent U.S. intelligence apparatus, which, of course, there was a lot of British involvement with that in the creation of, the CIA and the OSS and all of that in World War II. But that alliance officially happened. It's known as Operation Underworld, even though the U.S. intelligence community denied it for several decades. They now admit it. But that alliance, it was justified out of wartime necessity. We have to team up with the mob to win the war, right? But after the war, the alliance provably continued.
Fast forward to Epstein. Webb points to his relationship with figures such as Ehud Barak, a former Israeli prime minister, and to his role in operations involving U.S. senators and Silicon Valley executives.
To Ari Ben Menashe, Ehud Barak was one of the higher-ups that Robert Maxwell referenced as having approved Epstein before he introduced him to Epstein. But supposedly Ehud Barak says that he didn't meet Epstein until the late 90s. But there's a lot of these cases where people say, no, I met him way later, and all of this that have turned out to not be true. Like Bill Gates, for example, saying it was 2011 was their first meeting.
That was bullshit.
Yeah.
Why would intelligence agencies do this? The answer is simple: control.
John Kiriakou, who's a former CIA analyst, has talked about how, in the CIA in particular, you want to cultivate a source because you need their intelligence, you need their information. It's essentially agency policy to give them anything they ask for in order to secure access to that information and that intelligence, even if it's kids.
So why does this matter now? Why should we care about a dead sex trafficker and some old conspiracy about intelligence agencies? It's because the infrastructure didn't die with Epstein. The networks are still there. The people who enabled him are still in power. And the tactics, blackmail, financial crime, and elite capture are still being used.
The trail seems to have gone cold. We were promised all the files were going to be released.
Yeah.
The Black Book. And then suddenly there's nothing. There's nothing to see.
Well, there is the Black Book. That was released in 2015. But beyond that, yeah. So a lot of people were expecting all sorts of new information about the case, and there was this big, attempt at making it look like that happened with, a bunch of influencers came to the White House and had all these binders, and they were like Epstein Files Part 1, but then it turned out a lot of those documents, pretty much all of them, had already been previously released, and I don't know. It seems like the administration was expecting like that would be enough to kind of satisfy people, because they did, the bells and whistles and made it look like that's what they were doing, but then didn't expect, I guess, people to be like, so what gives?
Although some new information has come in, it is still not enough. Look at what's happened since his death. Jean-Luc Brunel died in a French prison. Mark Middleton was found dead, hanging from a tree with a shotgun wound to the chest, ruled a suicide. These aren't isolated incidents, they're a pattern. And the pattern tells us the system is still cleaning up its loose ends.
But the ability for the Clintons to do magic like this, I don't think they give them enough credit for how great they are in doing magic, right? Mark Middleton, a former advisor to President Clinton, was found dead in May 2022 in Heifer Ranch in Perryville, Arkansas. He was discovered hanging from a tree with a gunshot wound in his chest, despite no evidence of the weapon that killed him. Middleton had ties to convicted child trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, repeatedly signing him into the White House during his tenure as Clinton's special advisor. The investigation into Middleton's death by Perry County.
Meanwhile, we're seeing the rise of what Webb calls the censorship industrial complex, massive efforts to control information, deplatform dissent, and use AI to monitor and predict behavior. Webb warns that we're being herded into a digital control grid where everything is online, everything is surveilled, and the same networks that ran Epstein now control the platforms we use every day. The Wall Street banks, the tech giants, the intelligence agencies, they're all converging. Whitney Webb's research forces us to confront an uncomfortable reality. Jeffrey Epstein wasn't an aberration.
Pandora's box in a way, yeah, sure. Because basically, if you go, as my books show, if you go as deep as I went in writing those two books, and you could certainly go deeper, it basically shows that, the world is basically run by a meta cartel.
Explain that.
Well, I would argue, it is a cartel. It basically operates with impunity, and they have no accountability for all of their crimes, even when they're exposed here and there. Some people just are protected and above the law.
Focusing on Epstein as one evil man lets the system off the hook. If we want real change, we have to stop waiting for heroes to save us and start asking the harder questions. Who benefits from this system? Who's protecting it?
I mean, I just think it's really time that, do we really represent the values that we project around the world that we're supposed to have internalized? Or no, I don't think we do, because we've allowed our country to be run by literal monsters and criminals, and people act like it's fine. And, as long as we act like, there's nothing I can do about it. No, there is stuff you can do about it. And the first step is to get angry.
Because as Webb makes clear, this was never just about Epstein. It never was, and until we face that, nothing will change.